I can introduce myself if you want. My name's David. That's my research project title. I'm a officially third-year PhD student, but I've been here for 4 years, and Nancy Law is my supervisor, and I do want to graduate this year. I study pedagogical technologists. I will break that down for you in 2 minutes. And I study them in terms of ego networks, and this is something new. What is an ego network? It's everything related to a particular unit of analysis. For example, if we're exploring my ego network in terms of people, all the people I know belong to my network. For instance, in this room, if we're looking at my ego network in this room, well, all of you guys are connected to me now in this meeting. So ego networks, we can look at the people I know, or the meetings that I attend, or the roles that are connected to me, like professors and research postgraduate students. And everyone's networks can be different, right? The meetings that I attend are not the meetings that Zdenka attends. So her network of meetings are very different from my network of meetings, in the same way that the people I know are not the people that Jing knows. So I study these pedagogical technologists' ego networks within their schools. Several types of ego networks. Okay, so what exactly is a pedagogical technologist? I coined this term because all the technologists that I study have different job titles. And this is a part of the problem. This is a new job found only in certain schools around the world. I found them primarily in international schools in Asia. And we don't have a very clear idea of what they do and what they're like, hence I kind of put that monster up there. We don't have very clear mental models. They're not teachers in a traditional sense. They're not technicians insofar as they don't repair and maintain technological equipment. They are not primarily administrators. So I say they support the pedagogical aspect of teaching through technology. And that's really, really important because only certain kinds of schools are at a point to have a full-time technologist in their school to support this aspect, as opposed to like the maintenance and installation of equipment. So maybe even in Zdenka's case, because they just are at the point of putting in infrastructure, they don't actually need technologists right now. They actually need technicians. Okay, so why might these people be important and why study them? Well, we are in an age of increasing technological pedagogical change. And because of that, schooling reflects society, and schooling is changing as well. We must be changing learning outcomes, and that means changing teaching and learning practices, which means changing the pedagogy through technology. And maybe there's a way forward in having technologists in schools. Again, we don't know too much about technologists. We have an idea, there's some literature about technologists in higher education. Usually they're called learning technologists or educational technologists. There's a lot of literature on ICT coordinators in schools, and ICT coordinators are primarily teachers. They actually have teaching timetables, but then they have this kind of ancillary responsibility to support the pedagogical aspect or technological aspect of teaching through technology. But we don't have much literature on full-time pedagogical support specialists in primary and secondary schools. And I'm applying this ecological metaphor that my supervisor uses, and now applying networks perspectives to studying this special role in schools. Okay, so this is the latest version of my research question, and I use this ecological perspective of a school and a technologist. How do they change at the same time? How do they co-evolve? It's different from saying, how does a technologist change a school because of my changing theoretical framework? And these were some more ecological-based research questions I was thinking about. What is the pyramid number, the food chain? In a network's perspective, what is this network? What does it actually look like in the school? What are the interactions and what is the ecological impact? How does the network change with this pedagogical technologist in the school? Okay, I'm not actually doing a lot of literature review. I've done that for a long time, and it's really boring. I want to get to the interesting parts, the results, and discussion. My theoretical framework is complexity theory. I believe schools are complex adaptive systems. They are not so easily, we cannot so easily break things down to simple causality, a linear system. When we're thinking about changing schools, we must change several things at once. So schools are like stock markets and sports teams. They can be unpredictable, emergent, self-organizing, and creative. And I was grounding my data collection and analysis, which is different from grounded theory, at the beginning of this research project in 2010. I didn't really know what I was doing. And to be quite frank, I started collecting data on technologists and based on what was very interesting. And then as the more I collect data, the more I was able to articulate what exactly is interesting. The implicit became more explicit. And as I was sharing in the background, well, a lot of things happened in my life as a research student. I get a new research supervisor, and so all kinds of things start to change with the way I collect data and then view my data. As a result, in fact, most of my interviews were unstructured. And ultimately, I've been coding for all sorts of things, but to develop these things, I've been coding for the events or the meetings, the school roles, and the individuals in particular that are connected to a pedagogical technologist in school. And this is some kind of diagram that I will try to explain about my research protocol. So once a participant consents, then I can talk to them or observe them. I was observing meetings, and sometimes I collect documents to support the interviews and events. And I store everything. I take notes during events, observation. I transcribe interviews. I store everything. What helped me in my iterative approach to collecting data was just writing some summary statements, inductive summary statements. What impressed me from an interview or what impressed me from an observation. That helps me to figure out who next to interview or what else to observe. And I'd always send these things back to the participants to extend the conversation about my thoughts and also what else we can do, who else I can talk to, what else I can observe. So I used NVivo quite a bit to code for the people and the meetings and the roles related to these pedagogical technologists in schools. I haven't actually checked my coding yet. I'm done collecting data right now. And I collected enough data to write maybe 8 cases, but ultimately I might just include 2. And I will talk about these 2 shortly, about why I'm including them. Okay, this is the latest version of my conceptual framework of what a school ecology or network looks like. And we can see that an organization can be broken down into like organizational units. Like there's a faculty of education, there's like a research office, etc. And within these organizational units, you have meetings like this. This is a meeting. Postgraduate research conference is a meeting. And different kinds of roles, like students and professors, gather in these meetings, belong to these organizational units. Sometimes you have meetings that don't belong to organizational units. Sometimes they can be informal gatherings, like a meeting by the water cooler. And This is information flow. How do ideas or innovations go from meeting to meeting? Who is involved in this innovation flow? This is like the food chain or the pyramid of number. So sometimes we talk about ideas. Like we're actually going to talk about something here that's really, really cool, but there's no follow-up. So it just kind of just stays here, right? But sometimes an idea takes on a life of its own, and it goes from meeting to meeting, from organizational unit to organizational unit. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a bit about the case inclusion and exclusion. I'm going to present two ego networks for two pedagogical technologists, one in an international school in Hong Kong, another in an international school in Singapore. And I chose these because this is a case, the extinction of a pedagogical technologist in a school, and ultimately there's one of them, and he leaves the school, and he's not replaced. So you have this job in this school, and he does things in the school, and things happen in the school, but ultimately they get rid of the role. And then here, there's a pedagogical technologist in a school, and there's one, and then they increase in number. So the membership actually increases in this role, in this school. Okay, I've been making a lot of tables, and it's been difficult. I've been building the networks from these kinds of tables, and I'm still learning to make tables to articulate the networks. Again, I'm using qualitative data, and I didn't originally set out to build all of these networks. And I have a lot of data from interviews and observations and documents. And what I do is I take these and I start to identify events. Like AA refers to after-school activities, like an ECA activity. So identify an event. And then I identify individuals and their roles. So identify that there was the pedagogical technologist, some students, an ICT technician, and an ICT teacher at that meeting. Okay, and now I'm going to present some information about the results of these ego networks. And let's see if I can actually talk about all of these things. Okay. All right, now I'm going to start answering some questions about coevolution, ecological impact. This is the school in Hong Kong with the technologists that ultimately became extinct in that school. Before there was a technologist in the school, there was a teacher in the school who became the technologist. And in this school, before the technologist, we had these kinds of events that the technologist attends. But after the technologist becomes a technologist, this person becomes a technologist, he creates more events in the school. So we can see that one thing that a technologist does is the technologist actually creates more kinds of meetings. All right. So he already attended these meetings, but then he created these meetings. And now we're going to, now that we have a kind of a layout of the meetings, let's take a look at the energy flow, information flow. Now this is tracing the path of a particular innovation called digital storytelling through the meetings. Meetings outside of a school and meetings inside of a school. And these are all the meetings that the pedagogical technologist actually attends, belongs to. So he hears about this idea. He teaches part-time in this university. And he takes this idea that he hears about from teaching this course into his afternoon activity, this kind of extracurricular activity, to experiment with this idea of digital storytelling. Then he finds a Year 9 biology teacher and partners with this Year 9 biology teacher to team teach Year 9 biology to implement digital storytelling. Afterwards, he goes to a conference with one of the IT teachers in his school to share about his experiences with digital storytelling through these afternoon activities and that lesson with the Year 9 biology teacher. He shares it again the next semester at the course. He shares it at a conference subsequently, and then he commercializes it. What happens after the Year 9 biology lessons are finished is that, well, he leaves the school. But also, that teacher finds another teacher to try to implement digital storytelling the following year in another grade level. And that teacher and her students also presented their digital storytelling products at a year-end assembly. Okay, now this is showing the digital storytelling innovation in terms of the roles, the school roles and organizational units that the pedagogical technologist was connected with in order to implement this innovation. And I'd actually like to thank Dr. Anatoly Gruz because he was very, very helpful this week in helping me to kind of figure out what I could do with my data. And we see organizational units like the IT subject area, year 5. We see that the school can be broken down into international primary, international secondary, national primary, national secondary. And the numbers show strength of ties. That is, through all of these meetings, how many times did they meet? So we can see that some people are more important than others. Like this IT teacher was present at least at 3 of these meetings. The biology teacher was present at 4 meetings. So these roles are very, very important for implementing this innovation. But we can also see that the pedagogical technologist in trying to implement this had nothing to do with an entire section of the school, even though notionally he's responsible for technology implementation in all areas of this school. Okay, now I'm going to show you the case of the technologist in the international school in Singapore. All of these events existed before he became the technologist. And then he created 4 events. And this is the map of the events that he belongs to, and then the flow of a particular innovation, an iMovie innovation in grades 3, 4, and 5 in the school. And what happens is he runs something called Textperts. So he takes 2 students from each grade level class, and they become the iMovie champions. Then they go back into the class and teach the teachers and the students. The technologist also meets all the grade level teachers twice a week to train them in iMovie. He also attends weekly other kinds of meetings where he meets all the grade level teachers. And he also creates teacher iMovie champions. And all of this feeds back into the lessons to implement iMovie in grades 3, 4, and 5. So this is, again, iMovie in terms of how this technologist contacts different people, different roles in different organizational units. So we see that this technologist is contacting heads of grades, teachers, and students, actually has contact time with them through these meetings. The reason why the year 3 teachers is 3 is because the following year, this technologist realizes that in year 3, the iMovie implementation wasn't very sound. So we're going to try to work on implementing iMovie again in year 3 in this way. Okay, so this is another map of another innovation at that same school the following year. The following year, they want to implement learning journals in all the grade levels, from kindergarten to grade 5 in this primary school. And in this year, there was an additional technologist. Now there are 2 technologists in the school. And we can see that the role has greater coverage now. And we're hitting years 3 in reception year. Now, the numbers are a bit higher for years 3, 4, and 5 because, one, when I was collecting the data at the beginning of the year, there was a lot of interference with camps and conferences that did not allow the technologists to actually meet with these lower grade levels for a time. Also, the way the learning journals are being implemented for grades 3, 4, and 5 are different from reception year to year 2. Okay, some things that I'm finding through just looking at all these ego networks. One, if we talk about changing education and changing teaching and learning practices, ultimately the meaning that is most important is the lesson because they're so numerous. And when we talk about, like, for example, yes, they're the most numerous, they're the most regular, they're the most compulsory. Going back to my title, the PT does not actually change anything by himself or herself. There are different roles, and we must work with different people, these PTs, to start co-evolving and changing the landscape of the school. Now, this was something that was very, very interesting about the difference between these two, and this. So the real difference between the school in Hong Kong and the school in Singapore was the nature of these meetings. In the school in Singapore, where innovation became more systemic and also systematic, things were compulsory, and all the teachers had to meet. 2 students from each class had to go. But in the school in Hong Kong, everything was voluntary. So you don't have to go to this meeting. You don't have to work with this technologist. The technologist had to build the relationships from the ground up. No relationships were compulsory or pre-made. So also something that I noticed, and Nancy wants me to focus on this idea of conflict. In the Hong Kong school, like, it was weird. The word conflict was never used in all my interviews and all the observations. People don't talk about tension. I was like, well, that is really, really meaningful. Because everything's voluntary, if you don't want to come here, you don't have to come. So then we don't have any conflict. But in the school in Singapore, all the PTs, all the people I talked about, they just kept talking about conflict. It was so weird. They were just so open in talking about the fighting that goes on. But I think the difference is the fighting is, I mean, people are so open about it because, in fact, the conflict is open because things are compulsory. People are meeting regularly to talk about these innovations, and people are uncomfortable with that. Okay, finally, some challenges. Because I started out not even thinking that my research would look like this, I have a lot of incomplete data. It was good to work with Anatoly this week to see what I could and could not do. For example, in building these networks, it's harder to find directions, right? Who is initiating, who is not initiating. But we could find, it was easier to find strength of tie instead of direction. In formulating my tables, the granularity was very, very important. It's like, okay, in developing tables, sometimes I'd have individuals and school roles together. No, these aren't the same units of analysis. So I want to be very precise in saying organizational units and roles, and then some kind of time element. Well, I actually don't know, ultimately, the complete network strength. And I think that's about it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, David, for the interesting presentation. Any questions for David?
Oh, 21 minutes.
So, well, this is a discussion. So, to what extent do you know your rights? How do you kind of need to have indication if your interests are right, or if it is just that you want to see in a way and therefore also you mentioned you still have to do like the coder.
Yes, yes.
Do you have any other sense? Are you going to do anything? Make sure that there are expectations.
Yes, I've done a lot of member checking. I've always fed back my thoughts to my research participants, and it's I've actually talked a lot even after I finished data collection with my uh, pedagogical technologists, these research partners, and I see a lot of consistency. Well, in talking with them, but also it's really cool to observe the pedagogical technologists who left that school in Hong Kong, go to another school. And there's a lot of consistent behavior in this person as well. If I continue to, if this becomes a longitudinal study, we see that this guy is he avoids conflict. And he's very much into building these kinds of ground up relationships. Nothing is compulsory, everything is very relational. So I see it over time. I can also continue to observe these people. I can discuss with these people as well.
I think it's very interesting. It's very interesting area where I'm working in schools. Sometimes I kind of see a lot of difficulties supporting this. So what kind of, if you had to make, I don't know if you're ready to do this kind of thing, but if you had to give some kind of policy advice, or even at the school level, like what would be the value added of having a person like this as opposed to, you know, the limited funds having another teacher?
Yes. We have to go back to, thank you. We have to go back to this idea that a school is a complex, adaptable system. And just adding a pedagogical technologist, it's not Superman. PT is not Superman. Adding just one school role is not the necessary change. You must change several things at the same time. We see with this case of this pedagogical technology in Hong Kong that even if you just create this role, the role can simply just fizzle out, and so do the innovations. I have another case which I didn't present where that also happens too. Another PT in an international school in Hong Kong for 1 year does his full-time, then quits. The role is now replaced. So I would recommend, if there is some kind of PT role, we actually have to change a lot of other things, going back to the other kinds of roles. What other roles are there to support innovation and to work with the PT to implement innovation? What kinds of meetings are there as well? What are the nature of the meetings in the school? See, part of the reason why there's a problem in the international school in Hong Kong is that there are actually no meetings to connect the grade levels in the subject areas. They actually don't talk. It's all informal stuff. It's all in the shadows. So there are no meetings for the PT to attend. The PT actually must create all these meetings. And it's harder to connect them with lessons, especially if everything's voluntary. So we must look at the ideas of whether meetings are voluntary or compulsory. We also have to figure out which school roles are involved in these meetings. Part of the reason why the school in Singapore is effective is because it's very systematic. You know, in order to change a lesson, we attack the lesson in different ways. 2 students from each class get taken out of the lesson, they become champions, they go back into the lesson. The PT meets every single teacher, at least twice a week. And also, they create ICT champion teachers, 1 per grade level, who also can serve as a mentor for the innovation in a school. So these kinds of things are systematic and compulsory. And that's why there's a lot of conflict. People don't want these kinds of things, at least at first.
Can I just say, well, sometimes conflict is necessary.
Yes, it is.
Improvement and change
Yes.
comes out of
Totally.
I've worked in both systems, and your little exemplar here is, I think, very typical of the difference between the Singapore school system as a whole and the Hong Kong school system as a whole.
Yes.
I supervised a few years ago what you would call a PT in Singapore, and his thesis was tangential to yours in a nice way, because you touched a lot in your brief talk on the power and influence relationships.
Yes.
His thesis was very much devoted to that, which was the different subcultures in the school.
Yes.
The technologist, because he wasn't a technician, and the people he was studying they were technologists in your sense. Coming from a predominantly technical background,
Yes.
in an otherwise professional teacher
Yes.
culture, and the juxtaposition of those two different cultures trying to work together.
Yes.
Have you seen his thesis? Michael Friesen.
I've not. I will.
You must look at that.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yes, I will.
It's not exactly on your, but it's very tangential to your thesis. And
Yes.
It would be and it's Singapore, and it's an international school.
Yes.
So it's right. It would be very useful.
Yes.
So I'll give you the details.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. You know,
Did you find this relationship between the PT and the teachers? For him was the axiomatic thing. It was problematic. It was conflict. Teachers tended to denigrate and look down on the technologist. But in their hour of desperate need, when they needed technological help, of course they were cap in hand to the PT, and the whole relationship suddenly changed when they needed help.
Yes. And how do we create that need in teachers to need help? And that's when things become compulsory. When we know that something is upon us, then we might take action and reach out to other people. And we also create the mechanisms to be supported. It was interesting that you mentioned the idea of culture, just different kinds of cultures. This was a problem in this school and also in another case that I have. Because this international school has like international stream, an English language speaking stream, and then another kind of national curriculum stream. Small wonder that this PT has a difficult time, even though he's responsible for the entire school, has a hard time penetrating this because he doesn't speak the language. I have another case of another PT in an international school here in Hong Kong that is structured similarly, and it's a different school, and what they ultimately did was they hired a PT for the other stream who spoke the language. And that's how they were able to penetrate with ICT implementation across the streams. Just get someone else who speaks the language as well. But that can be a very, very difficult thing. It's not only language, but the culture.
It's a very interesting discussion. So let's move to the next session. So thanks for coming for this session.